Would you look at that? Lemon blueberry quick bread. And I'm going to show you how to make it today on Too Haute to Handle. Welcome back to Too Haute to Handle. I'm your host, Haute. And we have got a delicious lemon blueberry quick bread to make. So let's get started. Before we do anything else at all, we're going to set our oven to 350 degrees to get that nice and preheated for our bake. And the next thing we're going to need to do is grease our baking pan. This is a 4x8 glass loaf pan. You don't have to use glass, you can use metal, but 4x8 dimensions work really well for this. And I'm just going to use some vegetable shortening. I suppose you could use butter if you want to. But I find vegetable shortening just fine for this application. I can scoop out a little bit and kind of paint up the sides. Don't have to be real neat about it. Spread that around. Have a little more when necessary. And give the bottom kind of a good spread of coating. Get it more or less evenly distributed. And now, of course, with the spatula, that's not quite even distribution. So then I will turn to essentially what are the best tools ever invented for the kitchen, your hands and fingers. Just reach in there and smooth it all around. What could be faster? Make it even on the bottom as well. And that's it. We're good to go on that. The next thing we're going to do is take the zest from the lemons. Now, it goes without saying, or hopefully it goes without saying, that before we do anything, we need to take off these little supermarket label stickers here and actually wash the outsides of the lemon before we even begin, because this yellow part of the skin is actually going into the cake, and you want it clean. Some stores wax their fruit to make them more shiny and appealing in the market, and you know, it can just get general dirt from transport. So take off the stickers, wash them, scrub them with a little vegetable brush, and then we can begin. All right, now that they're all washed and the stickers have been peeled off, turn to our microplane grater and start the zesting process. Now, this is very critical. This yellow layer of the skin of the lemon is very, very thin. It doesn't go quite deep into it. And underneath that is a quite thick layer of white, fibrous stuff known as the pith. And we don't want any of that because it is quite bitter. However, the outside of the skin is delicious and it holds many of the essential oils that just convey the flavor of lemon. That's why the microplane grater comes in great, because it doesn't dig deep into the fruit. It just takes off the skin, the very tip. And so the way I approach it, excuse me, is just to give it a little rub like that. And I'm not sure if this actually shows up camera, but you can just see the white. Don't go any further than that. Move around. So as I rub it along the grater, I actually keep it slowly turning. And so you can see a little white ring around that, and then move down the lemon, just like that. And we will continue to do that all the way around for all of these. Now, you don't necessarily have to zest all 4 lemons. What you're looking for is 2 tablespoons of this zest here. And not loosely packed. I mean, you know, I'll squeeze them together and get them densely packed, so that might be half a tablespoon so far. It really depends on the size of the lemons that you have. The last time I did it, they were actually quite small lemons, so it did take all 4 of them. This time it may not, because these are actually rather large as far as the lemons in my local area go. So you just keep working until you have that 2 tablespoons full. And again, only slightly get that yellow part off. And leave the white behind. If you start seeing white on your catching plate there, you've gone a little too far, and I would do anything I could to get all that stuff out of there because it is not tasty, not good to eat. Now, as we approach the end of the zesting process, that's good, you'll notice that under the grater, there might be a lot of zest in there that gets stuck, so don't leave that in there. I just use the end of the spatula I have, but whatever you have that'll work. The end of a spoon or fork or any other thing, just scrape it on out there and get every little bit of that lemony goodness. Okay, now that we've harvested the zest off of these lemons, we are going to want to take all the juice out of them as well. And actually, before we do that, one little thing that might help is to roll them out a little bit to get the juices flowing. And that's basically just take it right on your table and lean on it and roll it, roll it, roll it. Maybe it might be actually better to do it on the pan. But roll it, and this will kind of break up some of those cells on the inside of the lemon so that when you do go to get the juice out, it'll come out much more easily and require a whole lot less work to get that out of there. So that's it. Lean in, lean in. You feel like you're kind of squishing it, and then it's just fine. There, done. Now, just take the first lemon, slice it right in half, and put the strainer over your bowl. And here's where the citrus reamer comes in handy. Just shove that right down into the middle of the fruit and start twisting it as you squeeze with your other hand. And I really have found this to be about the most effective way to get that done. And you see that'll pretty much clean out that entire lemon there. And of course, your strainer catches all the stuff that we don't want. Easy peasy lemon squeezy. Now, if you don't have one of these, like I said, that's perfectly fine. And I'll show you what I would do if I didn't have one, which I did for all the time that I didn't. Cut the lemon in the same way, and then just use a spoon. Same procedure, basically. Jam that spoon right in there and squeeze and kind of turn it. This is not quite as quick and not quite as easy. Makes it a little more awkward to hold, but you know, anything will do. See, it leaves it kind of a lot in there, so this is why I prefer the reamer. And squeeze it right up against all those little ridges and make very short work of it. Now at this point you have a lot of pulp and seeds and mush in there, but that still holds a lot of juice. So I would just take the back of my spoon and kind of push it down a little bit against the screen, and more of that delicious juice will fall right on out into your bowl. Lovely. Now, I hope that this doesn't really need to be said, but I will say it anyway, because maybe there are people that don't know. Do not, under any circumstances, do not be tempted to use lemon juice that comes in a little plastic lemon that you squeeze, or in the green bottles that say that it's real. Those substitutes will never do. They have off flavors, and if you've ever tried to use that, use fresh squeezed lemon juice again in the same recipes that you've tried before. You will be blown away by how different it tastes. This gives you the authentic, real, unbeatable flavor for anything lemon. Squeeze it yourself. It only takes a minute, and it's so much better than anything you could buy. Take that to the bank. So that's not bad at all. A pretty impressive yield. Out of 4 lemons, I got just under a cup of lemon juice. I'd say that's about 7.5 ounces. Now, we don't need all of that lemon juice for this recipe, but save it. I'm sure you can find another thing to use it for, whether it's drizzling it over fish or Wiener Schnitzel or anything else. Keep it on hand. You can keep it in the refrigerator for several days, and it's just so much better than any kind of thing you can buy in a squeezy or a bottle. Can't say enough about that. But I digress. We will move on. Okay, and now we begin assembling the cake. Well, it's not technically cake, it's a quick bread, but it's so moist and dense, it feels more like a cake than a bread. At any rate, to begin with, most cake batters or bread have 2 sets of ingredients, those that we call the wet ingredients, obviously anything that's liquid, and the dry ingredients, these powders. Now, oddly enough, sugar is considered one of the wet ingredients, and I suppose that's because it so easily dissolves in liquids. Anyway, we're going to start with the wet ingredients, which begin with 2 eggs. Just crack those right into your bowl. And before we add anything else into the eggs, I like to give them just a little whip to get all the emulsification started. Don't have to go too very long, but break them up and make sure that any kind of big lumps of the white that you might see are incorporated very well and blended so that you don't see them lumping that there. And now we need 1 full cup of sugar. And we'll whisk that together. And then 1/3 cup of melted butter. And please use butter, no margarine, no oleo. And if you have something called I can't believe it's butter, believe me, I can believe it's not butter. So, 1/3 cup of real butter melted in. I just put that in a bowl and probably 45 seconds to a minute in the microwave will melt that just fine. And it's cooled off, it's not boiling hot. But give that a go. And that's all nicely incorporated there. And then finally, we'll want to add about 3 tablespoons of the fresh squeezed lemon juice. And give that a little spin. Very good, and now we'll move on to the dry ingredients. Okay, for the dry ingredients, first thing we'll do is start off with 1.5 cups of flour. Now, to measure the flour, I use what's called the scoop and sweep method. Basically, you scoop up enough flour so that it's overflowing the measuring cup, but then just take the back side of a knife and sweep it off, even with the top. It's a pretty good accurate measure of 1 cup. So we're going for 1.5 cups. Same thing, scoop, sweep, done. 1.5 cups of flour. Now to add to that, we'll also need 1 teaspoon of baking powder. And please don't make the mistake of using baking soda. You want baking powder. Very different. And finally, we also need 1 teaspoon of salt. There we go. And once all those ingredients are in there, the dry ingredients, and I will just give this a little whisk around to kind of mix those all up. And then we will incorporate the wet ingredients. into the dry ingredients and give it a little beat. Make sure every little drop of all that deliciousness comes out of your bowl and into the flour. And it might be a little tough to stir at first, but just keep working around till all that flour and salt and baking powder is incorporated in there. 4 minutes. You could do this with a hand mixer, no problem. I just tend to take the traditionalist kind of way of doing things, and I find the easiest way is to take the bowl and just grip it and use your other hand to go. And it frees up, keeps it from spinning all around the table. And you get a nice good mix on it. Still need to add about a half a cup of whole milk, and I'll just put that in a little bit at a time so we're not splashing around, and that'll loosen up this batter quite a bit. There. Now that looks just about perfect. Kind of forms a ribbon. That's exactly what you want. And now we're ready to add some lusciousness to this. Now the final ingredients that we're going to have to make this lemon blueberry bread are, of course, fresh blueberries, your finely grated lemon zest, and this is about a half a cup of chopped walnuts. And we're just going to simply fold those in to the batter. Now, before we put the blueberries in, there's a little trick I like to do. I think we need about a cup and a half. This is probably a 2-cup container, so I'll save some of those back. But there's a common problem in baking these pieces of fruit into a bread, and that's that they have a tendency to sink all down to the bottom of the pan, so you have lots of bread on top and fruit on bottom, which makes it not so good. There is a trick that you can do to help them stay suspended in the batter so that they're evenly distributed all through. And it is, I take a little spoonful of cornstarch and a spoonful of all-purpose flour, and just get them all coated there. So to get rid of that excess flour and cornstarch, I just put them in a colander and give it a good shake, and all the loose cornstarch and flour falls out the bottom, and you've got your nicely coated fruit here. So now, the final step is to take these ingredients and fold them in to the batter. So here's your half a cup of walnuts, your couple of tablespoons of finely grated lemon zest, and your blueberries. There's a little extra flour, but that doesn't matter. It's not going to change anything. And the idea is to fold these all in. Now folding means to just gently blend it together. You don't want to beat it, you don't want to break the blueberries or anything. So to fold, I generally will go all the way around and then straight down the center. Then all the way around and straight down the center. Just like that, very gently. Keep doing that until all your ingredients are evenly distributed throughout this batter. That looks just about right. Just an easy fold there. Now here, you'll remember our 4x8 greased pan, and we are just going to empty this batter right down into the middle of it. Forgive me if I'm blocking your view. It's a little different doing this in the reverse for the camera. I'm going to grab it this way. That's easier. Give it a little jiggle. you see too much fruit clumped up, you might move some of it here or there. But that is it. All it has to do now is go into our 350-degree oven for about 60 to 70 minutes. Now that our quick bread is in the oven, we're going to make the glaze that goes on top of it. It's a sweet and sour, lemony topping that is another reason it seems more like cake than bread. But basically, take your fresh squeezed lemon juice and put 2 tablespoons of that into your bowl. And then we have powdered sugar, or confectioner's sugar as they call that, and we're going to put in about a half a cup to start with. Now the measurements are not all that critical. You can add more of this or more of that as you need. But a half a cup is a good place to start off with 2 tablespoons of flour, and then just use a little whisk to put it together. You just want to beat until it's smooth and creamy and you don't see any dry flour. And you get a pretty good thickness on it. And that's it. Now, at about the point that it's 10 minutes before this is ready to come out of the oven, take some of that glaze and just spoon it over the bread, especially into that crack that forms at the top. And this glaze will just kind of absorb into the top of the bread and make a nice little crunchy top as well. Alright, so after about 10 more minutes in the oven, I'm going to take that out, put it on a cooling rack, and let it sit here for at least 10 minutes before we take it out of its mold. Alright, so this has had a chance to cool for about 10 or 15 minutes, and now we're going to turn it out. Before we do that, that glaze has formed a little bit of a sugary crust around the top, and you might want to take just a very thin bladed knife and kind of go around just the perimeter to loosen that just around the top so that it doesn't hang you up and have the bread stick into the pan. And with that done, it's usually, with good luck, as simple as turning it over, pulling it out, and then rolling it back. All right. So we'll let this cool completely, maybe an hour or more before we slice into it. I know it's tempting to just go right in there right now and take a bite of it, but we want to let it cool for at least an hour, because if you cut into it now, steam will start escaping, and that's your moisture. It will become very dry if you cut it while it's still hot. So if we let it cool down, that moisture will stay in there throughout the whole cake. However, before it finally cools, we do want to put the rest of the glaze on it. And what I do is just take a half sheet pan and put this cooling rack right on top of it. And that way it'll catch any of the extra glaze that drips off the sides. And so the same glaze that we used before, we can just kind of dribble across the top. It's not really, really thick, but on this, you might want to help it down the sides because there's usually a little ridge here. So I go slightly below the ridge and drizzle it so that it actually goes down the sides of the cake as well. And do that all the way around. And if you have any left over after you've gone all the way around the sides like that, then you just pour it right back on the top. And it's going to be so delicious. Okay, that has had plenty of time to cool off, and I've just transferred it over to a little serving tray. And so now is the real test to see what it's like inside. Oh wow, thick with blueberries. It looks just delightful. Man, oh man, oh man. I don't know if I'm even going to be able to wait. In fact, I know I can't wait to taste it. I'm going to give that a little bit of a try here. Mmm, that is so perfect. Fruit is nice and juicy. The taste of lemon is all through there. Can't be beat. You got to try this. Thank you so much for joining us for this episode of Too Haute to Handle. If you've enjoyed what you've seen, give us a like. Click the like button on your Facebook or YouTube or whatever platform you happen to be watching on, and feel free to share it with your friends. That's all for now. Come back soon and see what's cooking.